Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the SOM TV podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wise. On today's episode, I am bringing back Steve Matthiasson. Steve is one of my best friends in the industry, been in a ton of my movies, and he's a frequent guest here on the SOM TV podcast. But more than that, Steve is one of the smartest people in wine, and he's one of the most positive. Right now, the wine business is in a very strange place. A lot of businesses are, but this is a wine podcast, so we're going to go there. And I want to say, it's not as bad as people think. Steve and I have been speaking for several weeks about what do we do? How do we save it? Is it in trouble even? There's a lot of questions I think a lot of people are asking themselves, and they're a little nervous. So on today's episode, Steve Matthiasson and I are going to hold a mirror up to the wine industry. Steve being a veteran of farming and winemaking sides of the industry, we can cut through all the BS of what's going on right now. We talk about everything from what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right. I'm hoping everybody who has a little bit of concern or is just wondering what's the future of the wine business at the moment will listen to our conversation. It's one of my favorites I've had in a very long time. Before I speak with Steve Matthiasson, I do want to tell you, the holidays are coming up very soon. This episode is brought to you by SOM Blinders, our blind tasting card game. You want to have a lot of fun with some people who like wine and maybe educate some people who don't know that they like wine yet? Get SOM Blinders. It's a blind tasting card game you can play with your friends, relatives, and if you're really good, maybe you can beat them. That always feels good too. Go to blindersgame.com and you can get 50% off any of our decks. And think ahead, all the holidays are coming. Put a Blinders deck in somebody's stocking this year and be a hero. Blindersgame.com. Without further ado, Steve Matthiasson. Steve, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're in the middle of 87 harvests and launching your new clothing brand, which I look forward to seeing. I wanted to have you on. You and I have been having many off-mic private conversations about just, do I call it the state of the wine business, the wine industry, the wine world? I don't want to get too big with this comment. What are we calling this? I wanted to say we're going to put the wine business in triage and talk about what needs to happen or what you think should happen.
I don't know. I don't know what should happen, but maybe what could happen would be somewhere.
Well, why don't we take a step back? What is happening? What's happening?
Yeah.
Why are we having this conversation in the first place?
Wine's in an international and historical crisis time right now for lots of different reasons. That's the problem. Is sort of a perfect storm situation with all these different challenges that are facing us. And it's ironic because it's also just a great time for wine. It's probably one of the best times ever for wine. So that's what's so crazy about it is that it's sort of best of times, worst of times kind of situation. But I think there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of possibilities as well, because part of the shakeup, I think a lot of interesting things are starting to happen as well. And I'm hopeful about it.
What's the perfect storm of what's wrong? What do you mean by it's a perfect storm?
Perfect storm meaning that you have climate shifts that are presenting challenges in wine growing regions all over the world, or just presenting change, right? Some of the regions, it's like, hey, we're having the best vintages we've ever had, but it's a different wine, let's say, maybe than it was before when it might have been harder based on too cold or too wet or something. So there's change happening. In some cases, it presents challenges or different types of challenges, and it's all over the world. Droughts, or just it's warmer, or or it's warmer in the spring, they bud out faster, and then you get a frost or something that comes in that you didn't used to have as many problems like that. So it's just those sort of things. But anyway, so that's one layer of the onion. Then you have the international trade, tariffs, inflation, economic uncertainty, all these sort of like macroeconomic conditions that are really problematic for the wine industry. I mean, from the standpoint of wine moving around, from the standpoint of the cost to make wine, from the standpoint of people feeling like they can safely invest their money out of their wallet into, fancy, expensive wines. Is that a wise decision for a consumer? So all those kind of macroeconomic stuff. And then part of the perfect storm is just the cyclical nature of wine. And coming out of COVID, where a lot of people stocked up, and then so then they need to draw that down. And so, whether it be someone's personal wine in their house, or the restaurant, or the distributor, we're digesting all these people that stocked up, and that's worldwide. That's another layer of the onion. And then you have this whole wine health sort of temperance movement happening that is really, as well, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not drinking as much as I used to. Or I used to think it was really healthy for me. Now I'm hearing it's not healthy for me. Like I used to think it was good for my heart, but now I'm hearing it's not good for your heart. And in fact, it's bad for me. causes cancer or messes with my sleep patterns. And then you also have just the boomers getting older. They were a big wine drinking cohort. Just demographics, there are less Gen Xers than there were boomers. So the boomers aren't getting replaced by as many warm bodies, basically. That's why we by the perfect storm, we have the whole layer of challenges. They've all kind of hit at the same time. And so there's like all kind of unsold fruit, unsold wine, wineries really struggling, chasing consumers, the short-term cash flow issues of people, because 23 was a big crop. So that there was a big investment that you're dealing with Mother Nature. When Mother Nature gives you extra grapes, it just, you find yourself spending more money that year than you were planning on. It's a wild time right now in the wine industry, and there's a lot of self-examination within the wine industry of how can we get through this? What does the future look like? Do we just hang tight and wait for things to come back around? That's one strategy. Do we make less wine and just kind of shrink the size of our business and just hope to contract to meet the business? Do we switch up how we do things and try to offer something different that millennials want? We just ride it out and we be true to who we are and what we do, and just ride it out and hope for the best. So everyone has a different strategy.
Well, now let's talk. So you've laid it out. It sounds that's a pretty scary picture you lay out, and I know that each one of those could be its own topic of a book, let alone a podcast. I speak to probably more people across a wide spectrum in the industry than many others that I know. I talk to everybody in every realm of production and growing and sales, and I listen to influencers that are upset that there are not a lot of people doing advertisement and this and that. And it's not all this negative, truly. I mean, those issues, I know you're a student of history. Wine is not something that has always been the same price. It's gone up and down. Demand has gone up and down. Why don't we just do a couple minutes on putting this time period in perspective with a little bit of history here on what wine has done. Wine's not alone in the global economy of suffering at the moment. I happen to have 2 feet into the entertainment business, which is also having a tough go at the moment for various different reasons, some the same, some different. I know that most industries are suffering a little bit, but focusing back on wine, has wine ever had anything like this before?
Well, we had Prohibition. We can't forget about Prohibition in the U.S.
That's a slight issue.
That was pretty bad, right? We went. I can't remember how many wineries. Just Napa alone might have had 120 or something like that wineries going into Prohibition, and 4 survived. So that was pretty brutal. And it's funny when you talk history because the summer we got to take a cruise on the Danube. It was like a wine club event where we invited a bunch of our wine club members, and we did this wine cruise on the river. It was super fun. And I'm sitting there. And it was kind of a bad news day, basically. And so I checked the news in the morning. I'm like, oh, this is a bad news day. Freaked out. Sit on the balcony and just watch these terraces in the Wachau kind of go by with a boat. And, those terraces were built during the Roman times. Even though that was on the other side of the river from Roman territory, they learned how to build the terraces from the Romans. So they built them. And so I thought, man, they've been growing wine on those frickin' terraces in Austria since the Roman times. And what has the Europe gone through since then? I mean, the fall of the Roman Empire, the Mad Max years that followed it, you name it, right?
The 100 Years' War is basically destroyed Germany and Austria. I mean, it laid waste to those entire countries. It is
but people
apocalyptic.
Grew grapes through that whole thing. That soothed me. I was like, you know what? This has been going on for a long time. Just cool your jets and just feel like this is the one thing we can count on.
Well, but also you have this weird thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is the right time, where humans are very particularly influenced creatures. And so you have this thing where all of a sudden certain wines, certain styles, certain grapes become in favor and they're more popular. And so this is not a new thing. Everyone talks about like Robert Parker or critics or styles changing. But I mean, this goes back to way before Napoleon. I mean, back to the 1500s, people would decide they really like sweet wines. They really like white wines. They really like wines from this area. And so then other areas get completely screwed. I mean, like, you have this ebb and flow back and forth, to and fro that has happened. Just look at Portugal and England. Just look at France and England. Just look at, the river system in France changing For a period, Chablis was the most expensive wine, most sought after wine you could possibly drink in Paris and in London. And then, when some of these ports opened up, it became different wines, and Chablis became a backwater place that was far away, and it just didn't matter anymore for a period. The only reason I'm saying this stuff is to put a little bit of perspective on the fact that there's also man-made reasons this happens due to just fads and choice that are also interesting.
Sideways, knocking out Merlot in the recent history. Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples like that, right? And then geopolitical, Tokaj was right up there with Chablis as an esteemed white wine region. And then when it became part of the Soviet Union, that was sort of the end of that.
It guillotined Tokaj. If you think about all the ferment and all the stuff from Hungary, there is no excuse that wine's not as known as white Burgundy, honestly. I mean, it's just because of the Iron Curtain shutting that off to the world. Nobody knows about it anymore.
I mean, look at Tokaj Friulano, the variety in Friuli, the Tokaj of Friuli. It's kind of trippy when you think about it.
I don't know how many people listening to this episode really have even heard of that before, honestly.
Yeah. Hungary, when they got back in, they said you have to take the Tokaj out. It's just Friulano now, but it used to be Tokaj Friulano. It's so interesting. I think of that as like California Chablis or something, and it's honoring this region. And so, right. I love Lopez Heredia. And
one of my favorite wines and one of my favorite people in the wine business. I love Maria Lopez. She is just the best.
And you think about what that family's winery went through, because they went through World War I and World War II. Also, the Franco years.
The Spanish Civil War.
The Spanish Civil War,
which we cover on Sound TV. There's a Cellar Stories where she opens up bottles that go back to the Spanish Civil War through that period and talks about her family being, basically killing each other. Cousin against cousin, uncle against nephew. Just terrible, awful stuff. And that's right in the center of wine. Yeah, every once in a while, I'll get a review on this podcast and somebody will say keep politics out of wine. And they'll give me 1 star. And I'm like, what you don't understand, and I understand why you're saying it, wine is politics. Wine is a literal book of politics. If you understand vintages and you know where it was made and you understand the way that these sometimes arbitrary country lines were drawn, it's not unlike, a wine region's where they draw the lines for a wine region and one part is expensive and one part's not, but it has the same soil. It's a fascinating thing.
Chateau Moussard, maybe they can't press because there's air raids, and so the neighborhood has to go into their cellars and hide out. Or where wine macerates for days on the truck going from the vineyards back to the winery because they have to go around roadblocks.
Yep. These are real serious issues. And most of what we're talking about in the industry is younger people are drinking White Claws instead of wine, So that's a very different thing than my home is being shelled. So I can't, can't harvest.
Yeah. That's an order of magnitude. But we do have a situation here where we need to pay for our homes in the wine industry. And so we like to be able to sell our wine. Thank God, by the way, we're doing pretty well at Matthiasson. So we're extremely fortunate right now that we have loyalty out there.
All right, we've outlined all this stuff. There's some negativity, there's some scary stuff, there's some real world metrics that are what do we do? Now, your perspective is fascinating because when I speak to, I don't want to call any groups out, but there are several groups in, especially a place like Napa or France, where they own many, many, many wineries, and they are larger, not quite conglomerates, but groups of wineries that are now owned by a larger group. And they're tightening their belts. They're cutting employees. They're sometimes selling property. They're letting fruit hang on the vine and they're not harvesting. Mm-hmm. And you have a very interesting perspective on how do we triage the wine business? Because when I ask that question, we're talking about everything all the way through marketing. We're not just talking about, do you bottle the wine? How do you sell it? We're also talking about, is it worth selling? How do we approach a new way, a new audience? And so what is your perspective on triaging this situation? Should we completely adjust? Should we make sparkling canned seltzer wines now? What should we do?
Yeah, got it.
Got
okay,
it.
So I'll give you my perspective. My perspective is that wine is something that people love, right? It's something that's loved, and it's something that a specific wine can be somebody's favorite. And Danny Meyer has Union Square Hospitality Group has this great quote where he says, I decided that I didn't want to be the best restaurant because you can argue about what's best, but you can't argue about what's your favorite. So I want to be the favorite restaurant. A lot of consumer products they're fighting over best because there's a very sort of, you can evaluate, like this vacuum cleaner sucks up dirt better than that vacuum cleaner, right? And it's more reliable than that vacuum cleaner, so Consumer Reports gives it more stars. But in wine, you might say, well, I just like this vacuum cleaner. It's my favorite vacuum cleaner. And the reason that I love it is because it touches my soul. I feel a connection to the people. I feel a connection to that place. It's meaningful to me on a deep level, not just a price value relationship level. It's a emotional thing. And that's the beauty of wine. That's what we love so much about wine. That's why you and I are obsessed with it, and we organized our lives
Sure.
around it.
I don't know if it's organized, but our lives are definitely around
You
it.
dumped your
I
life
want
on top of it.
it's just like books all over the floor. But I want to say something really quick, Steve. I think something about wine that is really important to bring up, and why I think wine and movies and maybe books fit into this too.
Mm-hmm.
When you're at a certain age, people being receptive to something beautiful dulls as they age. Not everybody, but some people. You don't have your eyes open when you see children playing and go, that's beautiful. You just sort of drive by them. But when you're younger and you see a movie, like for instance, if you went and saw the movie Step Brothers in the theater and you were the right age, you might go, that's the defining comedy of my life. It could be Caddyshack if you're old, it could be This Is the End, or, 40-Year-Old Virgin. And when you watch those movies, they become something for you and forever. That's a movie. Ghostbusters. You're like, that's the movie for me. And I think wine is exactly the same way. When you have a wine at the right age, when you're listening to the music, when you can hear, when you're interested in knowing about what it is and where it came from. And I think those wines that I had when I was 24, 25, 27, 29, and I tasted them and I heard the stories, and maybe I just was in the right situation. Those wines are for now. You talk about your favorite wines. Those are generational wines that I return back to for comfort. They have made an impact on me. And I think one of the biggest fears I have for this generation is they're going to miss out on that. If you're not tasting wine with an open mind, and I'm not talking about expensive wines, I'm not talking about rare ones, I'm just talking about that age where you hear the music and you're interested and excited by stuff. It could be wine, it could be, doesn't matter. It could be just going to a sports game, or it could be falling in love with some girl. It's just, I'm afraid we're losing that. People are not drinking, tasting, thinking at the right age, because you build a core memory with this stuff. This is what scares me. I'm not scared of any of the other stuff you mentioned. The tariffs, administrations change, all this stuff happens and it goes and it ebbs and flows. The thing that worries me is losing a generation to hearing the wine, to understanding and listening to it. And I might be totally wrong, but that's what I'm afraid of. I don't know that that's happening. I just think back at, when you're younger and you receive, and I want to make sure that that's happening still. It worries me a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just listening to that and thinking about it, because I think about the era when I was college age or whatever, and exposed to all this new music and art and ideas. And but the wine I was drinking was dog shit, but I was really into it. I liked the idea of it. I mean, we went to a grocery outlet.
How do you not make dog shit wine? I would buy that right now. That's a great label.
Right. It was late 20s when I finally got exposed to the wines that opened my eyes, because I was into it, the dog shit wine, because I still liked it, and I liked the idea of it, and I was home beer brewing. I couldn't afford good wine, and I didn't have any opportunity to taste good wine. That I had zero exposure to good wine. I started working in vineyards before I'd ever had any good wine, because I had no freaking money and no opportunity like that. I didn't come out of restaurants or something. I worked in restaurants plenty, but I was always the dishwasher. I discovered good wine in my late 20s when it was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. So I still have hope that we can grab people when they have to just get it in their mouth. They have to get the wine in their mouth that resonates with them. And the beauty of wine is there's no best wine. I mean, for sure, there's wines that we can all agree aren't crappy, focus group driven, mass produced wines that have no soul.
How bad do you want to say names right now? We'll keep names out.
The wines
could we?
But a wine that has a point of view from a human being or a small group of human beings that have a point of view, and they have a strong opinion about how they want to participate in the international discourse of wine. They believe they're putting their best foot forward and representing this site or whatever their vision is. Those wines are real wines, true wines. And then as a consumer, you're like, well, I don't like it though. I don't like that wine. Like for me personally, there's tons of wines I respect that I just don't like, but I respect it. And then there's other wines that I respect and I like, and those are the ones I want to drink. I'll taste everything, but then I'm like, these ones I didn't like them. That's fine. The beauty is there's a ton of wines. And so we don't want everyone doesn't have to like every single wine. We're not dumbing it down. It's not the lowest common denominator. That's like part of the whole point. As a wine lover, you can spend your entire life just continuing to try and explore. It's endless. It's so freaking diverse. Like it's unbelievable how complex it is. Like I'll go to a restaurant with like someone, they're like, I'm intimidated by this wine list. So I'm like, can you order? I'm like, I've been making wine for over 30 years. I have no idea what most of these wines are on this wine list. Never heard of them before. I have no freaking clue. And so don't feel bad. You don't need to feel intimidated. I don't know what any of these wines are. I can recognize a few of them. So let's talk to the sommelier, because a good restaurant, there's a point of view with the wine list also. So ask them, what are you trying to achieve with this wine list? And here's what I like to drink. And here's how much money I want to spend. Here's what I'm eating. What do you recommend? There's no shame in that. It's just a constant discovery. So I believe that when the younger generation gets that, realizes that, then we're good. But I do think that we have no idea what their taste is going to be and their individual tastes. And so where I think wine can go wrong is when we chase, because you can't chase the market with wine, even if you wanted to, because the time frame. If you have some new variety, by the time you plant that, grow it up, harvest and make the wine, get it in a bottle and get it in distribution, that could be 4 or 5 years. So how the hell are you supposed to chase a trend when that's fast, right? So that's why the people that chase, I don't think tend to, once in a while they'll hit because they have the muscle to sort of like dominate a sales channel. But for the most part, if all the great wines that you and I love were wines that the people that made what they believe in, and then hope they could find someone to buy it. So it's exactly the opposite of what they would teach you in business school, but it's exactly what wine needs to do to survive, is because when the passion's there and you believe in what you're doing, people will recognize that. And those are the wines that are making it through the market right now, are the ones that they did a good job expressing what they were trying to express via these vineyards and grapes, and people, that resonates, and that's real, and that's what's selling currently and getting people excited.
You and I are in two businesses that just never make any money, or at least are very hard to make money. It's a marathon. And the people who truly understand, I hate to make this about me, but making documentaries takes 5 years. Sometimes I'm making a film for 4 or 5 years. You're making a wine for 4 or 5 years. I don't get the luxury to be able to say, oh, vampire films are really cool now. What do you got? It's like, well, I've been making this film about the Roman Empire for 5 years, so I don't have a vampire movie. So
exactly.
Same with the wine stuff. You're like, I don't have it's not like I can completely change and make this a carbonic wine because that's hot right now. That's not what I made. I think when it comes to this, we can talk all about how it's a multi-year process, but it's still a business. So what do you do, Steve, to stay alive? How do you adjust without adjusting? What is your plan to stay alive? Do you think that the younger generation is going to come around to wine, or do you have to find a way to meet them somewhere? And is wine too expensive? I mean, what do we do here? How do we put this industry in triage and be able to be passionate? Because we can only be passionate if it still exists.
Well, so one thing is, I think, is that as the wine world has changed over the last decade or so, when we've moved away from sort of a small number of critics having a strong impact on the wine industry, now we don't really have these ultra-defined, super powerful sort of critical filter we have to get through on the one side. Then that now, it's a little more challenging for people that really relied on that. But for those of us who were trying to do something different, it's really opened up the possibilities. We have different ways of people learning about wine. We have social media and, all these different ways people are communicating on wine. We have podcasts, Som TV, all these different ways. There's many, many different ways now. So a lot of the wine world is trying to find their way through that, of the more established wine world. But when I talk about having passion and putting out what you believe in, that is what's going to resonate with people. It is what's currently resonating with people. Since the gatekeeper situation is kind of broken down, There's all this opportunity happening right now. And it's very freeing now that wineries can start branching out and go back to doing different varieties, different styles, different experimentation. When's the last time you had a Napa Cab as a chillable red, right? And that's the opportunity that we're being presented with right now with all of the disruption, is that all of a sudden now there's going to be opportunity for people trying different things. And I don't know what they all are. That's the beauty of it, is if the regular thing doesn't work and the winemaker says, well, what I'm really passionate about actually is sparkling wine, do it, right?
Is this just part of a natural, like, look, some of these big businesses they were just too big. They need to scale back. This is just part of an ebb and flow of a combination of capitalism and, consumers being able to choose what they want, just the market correcting itself. Is that what this is? And I ask this because I'm in both businesses, entertainment and
Mhm.
wine. And I find it to be just parallel street. I mean, they are moving straight down the same thing. There's two ways to look at this. One, we're effed. We're all in trouble. Everyone should be nervous, fear AI and worry about how things are happening. And we made too much. And there's no difference, by the way, with the pandemic of people making too much content. If you look at Hulu or Peacock or HBO Max, you're inundated with content. Same with wine. There's like so much wine and alcohol that was made during the pandemic to course correct because people were drinking more, or collecting more, whatever it is. But I wonder if this isn't just part of a just natural selection, because when the television came out, it destroyed movie theaters for a hot minute. And a filmmaker by the name of Stanley Kubrick, he made 2001: A Space Odyssey and Clockwork Orange and Full Metal Jacket, really one of the greatest filmmakers ever lived. He was one of the guys that stood up on a mountain and said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to theaters, best thing that's ever happened to movies, because now it's going to weed out the people that were making shit. They were making stuff that was just relying on the fact that people had nowhere else to watch it. They'd have to go to the theaters. Now we need to make stuff that gives them a reason to go to the theaters. And when I think about the wine business, as you said, there's a lot of dog shit out there, or at least a lot of stuff that doesn't have soul. And maybe it's not bad, but it's not worth talking about while you drink it. And it's not worth putting in your suitcase and bringing with you when you go somewhere. And that doesn't mean it has to cost any money. I just wonder if maybe this is just part of the process. And I know you feel pretty positive about how the world of wine is going to go. I every time I talk to you, you are like, it's going to be okay. Why? Because you have no backup plan, I guess. But
Exactly. It
but
has to be
also,
okay.
yeah, it has to be okay. But also, you're good at what you do, and I think you know that. And kind of in a similar, I'm not calling you Stanley Kubrick, but I think in a way that you are a great winemaker who knows how to sell stuff. I mean, Christ, I called you yesterday and told you have to be my next film. And you're in my next film for the reason that you're just good at this. You know what you're doing. You happen to be making interesting wines. You're one of the few people that is still lobbing experiments at the wall. I mean, you were trying stuff. So many people, they figure something that works and then they just keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time I've watched you figure out something that works, you try 5 other things while it's working. And that's the person that survives. So that's my 2 cents of knowing you now for, I don't know, 16 years or whatever it is we've been working together. But I'll ask you flat out, are we going to be okay? Everyone listening
Yeah,
who's worried about their job, we're going to be okay?
I think we are. I think that wine is timeless. I'm a big believer in just visualize the path. Like I'm a big mountain biker, right? And you have to look at where you want to go. If you look at the rock that you don't want to hit, you hit it. You have to look at the spot between the two rocks, and that's where the bike goes. You goes where you're looking. That's like a rule of mountain biking, is look where you want to go. So with our business, I want to look where we want to go. There might be some natural selection. I struggle with that as something to be zen about, because a lot of the people that work in the more corporate wineries are my friends, right? These are great people. It's not like the people that work in the corporate wineries are shitty and the people that work in the family wineries are nice.
Yeah, I want to say back to what I said.
Yeah.
I don't
Mhm.
mean that. I don't mean
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it's
yeah.
bad to be big or it's bad to be
Mhm.
popular. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes people make in art and every form of stuff we consume and watch, that the thought of like, just because something's successful or big or, well known, that it's bad. That's not what I mean.
I agree with you 100%. So, like, there's a side where I listen to, like, the Stanley Kubrick, and I'm like, "Well, it is part of it," but I'd like to see a situation, and I'm focused on a situation where the wine industry at large takes a step back and says, a lot of this hasn't been working. And my advice, lean into your passion. The big guys can do that just like the small guys. The big guys can just back off in terms of pressuring their team to be safe and say, you guys are super passionate about this vineyard or this way of making wine or this anything, do it. And we'll try to tell that story and explain why. And there's just a lot of staleness. It's not surprising that it's not as exciting. When times are good, no one wants to change anything because who wants to mess with a winning formula? But it's challenging times. So I think that the strategy of just saying, well, I'm just going to do what I do and wait for it to come back around that's the risky strategy. Opening up and trying to do something cool and different is the less risky strategy, I think.
I hope people have really heard what you just said, because that is a really, really, really inspiring and scary thing. Because I know, Steve, you and I are two people who have put everything on the table to prove that we were worth doing what we said we could do. And I'm not saying we're better than someone who hasn't done that. I just mean we've done it. And that is a certain kind of, I don't know if it's idiocy or bravery or whatever it is, to hear you say what you just said. Look, I mean, I got a lot of projects I would like to make very badly, and they're scary as shit, and I'm worried. And to hear you say what you just said makes me want to make them. And so I hope somebody out there is listening to this podcast and they are going, I wanted to do X and I'm going to do it now because of what you just said. And I think that is what the world needs right now. The climate and everything. Everyone's got a lot of fear around stuff. And we're not really, if you're listening to subtext of this conversation, it's not just about wine. It's about it all. You know, wine is a inventory product, but it's also kind of, as you've outlined, it's a passion and an art and a craft and a business. And it mirrors all the things that you could have gotten a job doing 10 other things. You did this. I think with wine, maybe there's a little too much. And I think hopefully people have the memory to look when it swings back the other way, because it will, and things will be fat again at some point, that I hope people remember this time we're in right now, where it's a little lean and scary and you got to figure out how to adjust. Hopefully they remember this. I think the biggest fault we have as humans is we don't remember what happened when it was tough. We don't take that lesson into the next era. Yeah. And I see it constantly. It doesn't have anything to do with wine, and it has everything to do with wine. Steve, every time I talk to you, it sort of fills my cup back up a little bit. I think if you're out there listening, you work for a winery or you make wine yourself or you work in a restaurant or maybe you're just an accountant, whatever it is you do, I think that there's a lot to take from staying the course, but also putting a little risk in there too. Do you have anything closing you want to say about about wine?
As a reminder that with everything else that's going on, circle all the way back, it's one of the most exciting times in wine. There's so many great wines right now and so many like young people. Like part of this opportunity I'm hoping for is some fruit's going to get cheaper, vineyards are going to get cheaper in the short term. Maybe winery facilities are going to get cheaper, and some of the next generation can get their foot in the door and kind of build. And in many cases, make different wines. I don't have to make different wines. They can make the same wines. They can make the wines of their grandparents or great-grandparents or their dads or moms or whatever. It doesn't matter. Point being that it's wines that they believe in and that they can get a foot in the door in this industry and get started. And that's super exciting.
Well said. I love it, Steve. I think we're overdue for a glass, you and I, so I need to get up to Napa. I'll plug that we have a new film coming sooner than I want to admit, and you'll be in it in a very pivotal part. I've been working on a movie for a very long time that we filmed in the Vatican, all over a number of places. It's a very difficult movie. I have struggled tremendously with trying to put it together, and we finally cracked it, and you're a large part of how I cracked it. So I hope everybody listening sees that. I also want to mention, you and I are talking about taking this podcast on the road, going places, drinking some wine with a real audience, looking people in the eye, laughing together and talking about serious issues and a lot more bullshit and wine. I hope everybody listening looks forward to that. So I hope the rest of harvest goes well for you, and I hope that you get some sleep and have a beer.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon, my friend. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to my conversation with Steve. I want to remind all of you, positivity. Stay positive. Nothing ever is going to get done well if we don't stay positive, especially in the wine business and beyond. I want to remind all of you to go to blindersgame.com, get that gift early, stuff it in a stocking, or just give it as a present. People will appreciate it, and we certainly appreciate the support. And if you're not a Som TV subscriber, we have a brand new original film coming in just 2 weeks to Som TV about an amazing family that works in Bordeaux in England, and they make wine on Windsor Castle grounds, on royal lands. They make a sparkling wine, and it's an incredible, incredible story. We also have lots of new stuff. We've just filmed in Oregon coming, and we have some other films we're about to announce. So go to somtv.com and sign up. It supports everything, including this podcast. If you'd like to partner with us, send us an email, sponsor, partnership, anything, hello@somtv.com. We are here. We have a huge audience, and we would like to work with you. Email us at hello@somtv.com. I want to thank John Adams, my producer, and I certainly want to thank Steve Matthiasson. You can find his wines at matthiassonwines.com. We will talk very soon, everybody. Stay positive and drink something nice.